thinking what deaf history, like a long time ago, what was it like for deaf people to be alive around the world? You know, I understand we have like A.G. Bell, Helen Keller, da 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 da. But truth is, like, ancient civilization. Let's get into it. So truth is, this research is very limited. Not a lot that we know about the deaf people back then, written down or documented. Even the oral history, we still don't really know that much about deaf people. I'm trying to do the best I can. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a historian. I'm just doing this for fun. So, a long time ago, the earliest documentation of deafness was from Egypt. There was a papyrus called what? A papyrus called the Ebers papyrus. I don't know if I said that right. But essentially it was like a medical treatment, a cure per se for deafness. Their version of their cure. It's disgusting. Yeah, it's disgusting. It has ant eggs, olive oil, goat pee, and red lead injected into the ears of the deaf person to try to fix their deafness. Yuck, bitch. Yuck. Okay? Disgusting. I don't even want to think about it. Regardless, the Egyptians themselves, they were not the only people who tried to fix deaf people or tried to cure deafness. As long as history has been here, we've known that, deaf people have memories of exorcisms, jumping out of planes, and all this crazy stuff. But that's another story for another day. Aside from that, the Egyptians, they believed what? That deaf people, disabled people in general, should be treated equally and respected fairly. As documentation shows that the Egyptian people believed that the deaf people were chosen by the gods, favored, if you will, as chosen people because of their sign language, communication style, and the way they live their life as deaf people. It was seen as something to behold, something respected, something to hold high status for. They were known for royalty status at times. They were known for arts, philosophy, etc. It was a respected title to be. So, what happens? Aristotle, the Greek philosopher himself, believed that deaf people were incapable of education. Deaf people themselves can't be educated. Why? Without hearing, they cannot be educated. Born senseless and incapable of reason. So, basically, he said that if you can't hear, you can't speak, meaning you can't think and you can't reason. So smart. So dumb. Obviously, his student, Socrates, himself also believed the same thing, just copied his idea and continued to spread it around. The two philosophers just spread all around the world that deaf peoples were tubers dumb because they can't hear. And I believe they probably never talked to a deaf person in their lives. But, that's my theory. I don't know. So, Aristotle and Socrates, the two of them did a lot of damage for a history of deaf people at that time. And that kind of thinking led to the hearing people ignoring them, casting them out, refusing to educate them, refusing to teach them, refusing to learn sign language or collaborating on communication. So with that, other cultures did the same. Even in China, the belief was that deaf people were possibly reborn again from previous lives where the person or that soul continuously made sins or was a sinner, a criminal, did heinous crimes, hurt people, bad stuff, and now that they were reborn again, could be the God's way of punishing that soul. So, again, all cultures across the world believed very similar things. Even today, a lot of deaf people still experience religious persecution and judgment for being deaf. Even in mythology, there has been links to deaf people and specific characters, such as the dragon in Chinese mythology, is typically portrayed as a deaf creature and can sense through his horns and can't hear. So it can be some sort of symbolism connected to deaf. And in general, most cultures in history have been disrespectful to deaf people and really have viewed them all as sinners. And in ancient Europe, it's the same concept. Deaf people were not respected. More often than not, they were workers, servants for royalty, kings and queens, mostly because their deafness served as a benefit for the royalty, as gossip and secrets could not escape the castle walls. So if they had deaf servants, it was typically seen as valuable for those hearing royalty. But very limited information is known about deaf people from around the world and in different cultures. More often than not, we really don't know what happened to those people, if they were put in asylums or educated at all. We don't know if they were put in closets, hidden and cast away from society. An Icelandic story goes as follows. There's a woman named Udni, herself deaf and mute. She had a brother named Thotskets, and he was royalty, a big political. But the two of them had a very loving relationship, and they communicated with wax tablet, and they went back and forth and written down communication in that way. The sister herself had a very big, very smart education. Little is known about her. Her brother, a big political figure, and it is good that they have a good relationship, but that is really the only, true is, good, positive story that I really saw. It is known that at that time in Europe and in Iceland, there are monks who used sign language and gesturing to commit to their vow of silence for religious purposes. Knowing that they couldn't speak, they would use sign language. What we know about deaf education throughout history is that the French school for the deaf was the first. The Institut National des Jeunes Sourds de Paris. I'm trying to fingerspell it and I can't do it. I'm just going to put it up there. But that school was founded around 1760. And it's known to have changed the way that deaf education and what people thought of the deaf community and people. True is, deaf people can learn, they can express opinions and think. There was a man, one of the teachers there at the French school, who was famous. Roch Amro Coucoran Sicard. He was the one who invited Edward Minor Gallaudet, a man from the UK who was learning how to transition education to America, to create the first American school. Mind you, I forgot about Laurent Clerc, okay? If I don't mention him, people are gonna kill me, okay? He was the man that went with Gallaudet to spread the ASL sign language education, to set up Gallaudet University, the world's first deaf university completely in sign language. And that is Laurent Clerc, who is also a French teacher at that school. He was the student of the previous guy, whose name I will not say again, and therefore spread ASL. ASL is not the first sign language of the Americas itself. It is actually has a long history of sign languages. The Indigenous Native Americans had hundreds of different sign languages across tribes in the country. The most known is Plains Indian Sign Language, PSL, or Native American Sign Language. but the genocide of the Native American indigenous people themselves and the deaf indigenous peoples in the Americas also erased their language and the language history. But for the longest time, it can be known that indigenous Americans themselves and indigenous peoples in general considered deaf people as equals, respected them. It's safe to say that we still have a lot of learning to do about deaf people and the deaf history, how we were perceived, respected, known, what we did even. Even different sign languages are lost to humanity now. Different sign languages from around the world that are just gone. And for a while, it seemed like deaf people were on the rise to their peak, their renaissance of deaf culture and sign language learning. And then A.G. Bell was born. That awful dumbass man. So he himself had mommy problems and then decided to make it everyone else's problems for the rest of the deaf people, obviously. Unfortunately, with A.G. Bell, his mom was deaf, and he had a deaf wife, and then deaf, obsession with deaf people, whatever. Long story short, A.G. Bell himself decided, deaf people? No, they should not get to marry. You should not get to have children. Truth is, he set up laws in the United States and spread the idea that deaf people, they're spreading their disease. It's genetic. Therefore, we should not have them procreate. We should not have them have children or get married to each other. And it reinforced the idea to people that deaf eugenics was the way to go. In 1880, A.G. Bell successfully enforced the law, the Milan Conference. It changed the world again. It changed the way that people looked at, taught, thought about deaf people. And basically said that sign language was banned. And now you are forced to go into oralism. But that is just not the way to teach deaf people. You can't hear and you can't learn to speak. It's just harder to learn from that. But the mindset in general was, they have to mainstream deaf people. You have to assimilate to the hearing world, and that's the way it should be. And since today, oralism has still made a long-lasting effect on deaf people, on mainstreamed deaf people, and he was partly successful in preventing people from learning their sign language, from getting involved with deaf culture and their deaf history and community. Anyway, however, deaf people have been known to become artists, lawyers, medics, politicians, all the types of things that you could ever imagine. And history does not define deaf people. We define ourselves. That we paved the way for deaf kids going forward. So yeah, that's what I have so far. That's it. And hopefully you enjoyed this today. I think in the future, going forward, I probably will do a deep dive on A.G. Bell or different figures and deaf topics. So just let me know.